Complaints fall into that category of subjective truth. And as such, we often tend to compare one to another. Like, do I have a reason to complain about this, that, or the other? And it's real presumptuous and self-centered and, that kind of thing. So we don't really talk about that, per se. How do we actually bring up when we're struggling with something? It's so easy to compare notes. It's so easy to say, well, my struggle has such and such quantity and it's bigger or smaller than somebody else's, so who am I to assert myself in that respect? A good example that I've got, at least, is that, I complained about having to go back to work. Some people don't even have jobs, and they didn't get them back when everything started to open up. So who would I be to complain about, I got to go back to my job, right? That'd be ridiculous. But it still has an impact. There's still a consequence in my life because of those circumstances. And so if that was the worst thing I was dealing with, is it really less? If that's the biggest struggle that I've got, is that really trivial? Even there, I got a coworker of mine who has an even longer commute than me. So here I am complaining about, hour and a half a day, something like that. 40 minutes or so each way, depending on traffic. Now this guy's got to deal with 2 hours one way. It took him almost 4 hours to get home on Friday because of an accident on a freeway. It closed it down. It's like, who am I to complain about that? To complain about commute. Except that, I was stuck in that same traffic, just at a different spot. Instead of 4 hours, it took me 2, something like that. And that was time that I'd have preferred to spend some other way. Sitting in my car is not unbearable by any means, don't get me wrong. I enjoy my car. But are there other things I would prefer to be doing with that time? Well, yeah. Of course there are. That's kind of the nature about complaints, is that we end up comparing preferences and trying to virtue signal, if I just don't complain, then my preferences must be, something. Or if I don't complain in front of the wrong people, if I complain to the right people, the people who care about me, know me, love me, all that kind of jazz, if I complain to the right people, then there's comfort. There's, I know, me too. I've also struggled with this, that, or the other. There's common ground, there's unity in that shared struggle. I just had to get out of the office for a bit. I had to get away from the computer screens. And again, complaining. Who am I? What right do I have to make the complaints that I do? But it got me thinking about when you play peekaboo with a baby. And I forget if it's actually got a real name or not. But the phrase that came up in my mind was object permanence. The idea being that, like, the whole reason the peekaboo game is entertaining to a child is because, something is there and then it's gone. And again, to my understanding, the way that the brain has been developed to that point, it's gone. Like, it isn't just out of sight. Like, that kind of a subtlety isn't something that the brain can comprehend when it's that undeveloped. That, when the baby closes its eyes, reality does, in fact, cease to exist. To the extent that they even understand reality, of course. Now, how does that apply to complaining? Well, if I don't hear other people's complaints, are they struggling? If I dismiss other people, Does that mean that their world just stops until I pick back up with them? Or is it that each of us has a life that we're already living? Each of us has things that are important to us that are independent of the people that we interact with. And that, for better or worse, we're not always going to be on the same path. We're not always going to be able to share the walk with other people all the time. I remember last year that I was sharing with my wife that, when it became apparent enough that all of this stuff that was going on wasn't real in the way that it was being presented. It's like what you do to mess with people's heads is you give them something that they think that they want. And then you let them have it long enough to savor it, to appreciate it, to enjoy it. And then you take it away on conditions, if you're clever. And you just watch. Sometimes parents will do this, just turn off the TV on your kids if your kids are watching TV and see their response. And it's not intellectual, to put it bluntly. So what happens if what we're given are relationships that provide some measure of comfort or validation? Not in the sense that it's an identity level, like, oh goodness, without this relationship I couldn't continue, but what happens if it's other people who share the same subjective truths on a variety of topics, but the only way that you know them is because of the circumstances? It's not a natural association. It's not a happenstance. It's not a meeting that could have happened any other way, so to speak. Like the quip about relationships forged under duress at the end of the movie Speed, I think. Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves. The whole idea being that apart from these circumstances where this madman is doing his thing, these characters would never have met. They'd never have seen each other and seen them at their best and at their worst, so to speak. I say that too much. I'll try not to. But what about the events that we've got going on? The concerns about viral infection don't stop for one pathogen. That's stuff that's going to continue. What are we going to do with the relationships that we've got at that time? Do we abandon them when it becomes inconvenient? Do we sacrifice? As circumstances change, do we continue to pay the price, however high it gets, in order to sustain what we've got? And does it really say anything about us if we can't make that sacrifice? Does it mean that we didn't enjoy the time spent with those people? That the friendships, that the relationships were just not as important? Or is the reality more along the lines that we're reminded of how finite we are, but it gets us a sense of excitement if others are going to bend over backwards to interact with us, if others are the ones doing all the hard work to maintain the relationship, then that makes us feel good about ourselves, right? And if others don't, then maybe it's us, but maybe it's just them. Maybe they're just lazy. Maybe they're just not caring enough about life, about us. Or maybe it's just a big game of peekaboo. That we forget that even people we live with that are in the same house, they live a different life. They have a different world. I'm out here beside a lake a few minutes from where I work. My wife is 30 miles away. We share time together And there is nobody with whom I have closer intimacy in this life right now. But we still live different lives. We still have to make an effort to be with one another. And not in a physical sense, in an emotional sense. We're tired at the end of the day. Me from my work and her from her work with the kids. Is it because we don't love each other enough that we don't make that time? Is it because we don't care, or we have problems, or we have anger at each other or resentment? Or is it just a bad day? Today was not the greatest. We don't have anything left. But that doesn't say much about tomorrow at all. See, the thing is, we're both morning people. We're not evening people in the first place. And as part of our routine bordering ritual, we spend time in the morning talking about stuff. And then as time goes throughout the day, we have tools to try and talk about things. So we're making efforts. We're trying to find ways to retain that relationship. Again, not because it's even on the rocks, but just because, life has every one of us on a different path. And it's so easy to get focused on the things that I'm struggling with, the things that I think are important, and to forget that she has a whole different set. And it doesn't say anything about what she thinks about me, any more than my different set says anything about what I think about her. We are not all just one being coexisting across all of reality. We're not all connected in that respect. We are different people. And though we may share a physical space, we're not living in the same world. We don't have a shared life. You look at studies about twins. It's like, even folks with the same genetics, same parents, they have different lives. It's a miracle that we find common ground with anybody at all, it seems sometimes. But I guess all I would say at this point is remember that there is a whole nother world that somebody else is living. Whether it's your coworker, whether it's your friend, somebody else that goes to church, your husband or wife, your children, the people that are walking by on the path behind you as you talk at a phone pointed at a lake. So many different lives, and each one of them with ups and downs, struggles that they face which may seem small to you, or maybe they seem big, but they're real. They're real struggles, and our ability to remember that, to not let us become the standard for comparison, is, I think, probably the most helpful thing when it comes to getting along with other folks. If I'm the standard and I'm what people need to unify around, then when people disagree with me, then it's an existential problem. But people can be different. People can have different opinions on things. People can be living in different worlds and still have something to share with one another. Something of value. Something that intersects those different worlds from time to time. Who am I to complain? I'm human. I'm alive. I have choices to make. Sometimes I make good ones and sometimes I make bad ones. And people listening to this, apart from the robots and the algorithms, you also got lives, choices to make. Some of them good, some of them bad. You've got struggles to face. Some of them might be bigger or smaller relative to mine, but for you it might be the whole world. That might be the entirety of your life, dealing with the struggle. And all I can say is don't let that become the definition of how people interact with you. That they need to share in that struggle. That they need to feel the same pain that you do before there is common ground. Figure out how to get out of your own head. Even if it's filled with anguish, disappointment, or boredom and apathy. One of the most dangerous things you can do is presume that somebody else is doing something for the same reasons that you are. I mean, how exciting is that, to know exactly why everybody does everything? What's more fun is to find out why people do what they do, to really understand them and how they think. And that starts from understanding that they're different, that they're not you. Whoever you are is not me. And your life continues even if I don't see it, or hear about it, or know about it. And likewise, so does mine. When I turn the camera off, or the battery dies, whichever comes first, or I just think I'm done talking, my life continues. And I've shared a window into it, I guess, a slice of it with you. But it's not my whole life. Like, that's not something I can actually share. That's not something I can really impart or give. But maybe it's enough for now. Maybe it's enough just to know there are other people out there. There's a certain age, I think, where people watching is still creepy. Like, you're not supposed to be watching people when you can just go out and live your life. That's supposed to be saved for when you're old and decrepit and you can't do anything anymore, so all you can do is watch. Except that, realistically, we're always watching. Especially if we're looking to please other people. We're watching to see, did we get the response that we wanted? What is it that we need to say or do in order to make the other person respond the way that we desire? We're still people watching, but somehow that isn't creepy. Well, we're just overt about it, though, sitting on a park bench, all of a sudden, that's weird. When it's innocent, when it's just, hey, I'm taking a time out from my life just to see what's going on in somebody else's. That's somehow weird. Getting out of your own head, not putting yourself as the priority, not having an agenda, not trying to figure out how to manipulate or scheme. That's somehow weird. Just observing the worlds that are turning around you. The lives that continue. The lives that didn't need you up to that point in most cases and probably don't still need you after that point. Peekaboo.